Julian Merrick had arrived early that day, earlier than usual. The Montecito air still clung to its morning chill as he unlocked the side entrance to the as-ever digital headquarters and walked briskly past the empty lobby. He liked being the first one in. It gave him time to breathe before the performance began. Julian wasn't a decision-maker. He wasn't the one who signed off on campaigns or stood on Zoom calls with Meghan's inner circle. His job existed between the cracks. As a digital insight coordinator, he spent his hours gathering metrics, evaluating sentiment, and feeding simplified reports up the ladder. Quiet work, mostly thankless, but it let him see everything before anyone else did. That Thursday, the team had been in good spirits. The recent launch of the Garden Glow collection had exceeded expectations. Engagement was climbing, influencers were sharing their unboxings, and Meghan's brief appearance at a community garden had gone viral. Soft linen dress, wide-brimmed hat, tulip bouquet in hand. It was the kind of imagery as ever thrived. Julian settled at his desk and logged in. He scrolled through the campaign tracker, then paused when he saw a flagged task in the internal dashboard. It read, "Post thank you note to followers from Meghan. Draft needed ASAP." The task had been auto-assigned to Declan Price. Declan wasn't early like Julian. He arrived just on time, always slightly disheveled shirt, half-tucked satchel hanging loose at his side, the faint smell of menthol gum following behind him. He was the brand's senior copywriter, known for his taste in Scandinavian typography and a disdain for anything overwritten. He dropped his bag, cracked his knuckles, and began typing. Julian watched from across the room as Declan leaned over his screen and crafted a short caption. 15 minutes later, the post was live. No approvals. No revisions. Just, "Thank you for all the support you've shown for at official Asever, truly humbled." The post image was minimalist. Cream background, faint blush border, and the brand's looping serif logo stamped in the lower corner. It looked intentional. It looked fine. At first, the response was soft applause. Loyal fans reposted it. Comments trickled in. The digital team relaxed. But Julian noticed something odd within the first hour. A handful of comments pointed out the lowercase sentence structure. Others questioned the dash placement. A few graphic design accounts mocked the spacing between elements. One account zoomed in on the blurry edge of the logo and called it lazy branding. A TikTok creator made a side-by-side parody, reading the thank you note in a sarcastic whisper and cutting to Meghan's past speeches. By midday, it had turned. Julian's metrics flagged a 22% increase in negative sentiment. The comments section shifted from warm to acidic. Hashtags emerged. The most viral hashtag is ever sloppy. Julian stared at the screen in disbelief. It wasn't even the worst post they'd done. It just hit at the wrong time, in the wrong tone, and now it was being devoured. He glanced at Declan, who was still staring at his screen, unaware or unwilling to react. Julian considered flagging it to the higher-ups, but he hesitated. It was just a thank you note, wasn't it? By the time the sun rose over Montecito the next morning, the calm inside the Asever office had already been broken. Sebastian Krall walked in through the executive side entrance, still wearing the black hoodie he had flown back in from Paris just hours earlier. His usual clean-cut appearance had been replaced with 5 o'clock shadow and a look of muted rage behind his eyes. He didn't say good morning. He just tossed his duffel bag under the nearest chair and demanded the team into the strategy suite. Julian had barely finished his espresso when the call came through. He grabbed his laptop and followed the others in silence. Declan trailed in. Last, hands tucked in the pockets of his oversized cardigan, pretending not to notice the eyes glancing his way. Sebastian stood at the head of the table, not bothering to sit. He pointed to the screen on the wall, where the Instagram post still sat, frozen in time. The caption hovered above it like a headline from a newspaper that had already gone to press. Then he began walking through the numbers. First, the engagement drop. Then the spike in comment to like ratio. Then the TikTok stitch count. His voice remained steady, but his pacing grew sharper with each step. Julian watched as the room stiffened. No one dared to interrupt. No one wanted to be the next Declan. Eventually, Sebastian stopped pacing and placed both hands on the back of a chair. Then he instructed the team to archive the post. Immediately, Julian opened the backend dashboard and followed the command. The post disappeared from the grid, but not from memory. It had already been screenshotted, mocked, dissected. The damage was out in the wild, now uncontrollable. Sebastian leaned over and instructed Julian to generate a list of alternative thank you notes that had been drafted but not used. He wanted to know why that one had gone live. Julian opened the shared drive and scrolled through the drafts folder, noting the timestamps. Only one note had been saved. Declan's. Sebastian turned his attention to Declan. Then he asked him what the intent was behind the message. Declan stood still, trying to explain that the post was meant to feel intimate, personal, and deliberately understated. He said he had aimed for quiet elegance. A pause. A breath between campaigns. Sebastian didn't respond immediately. Then he took a slow step forward and reminded the room, without raising his voice, that nothing about a multi-million-dollar brand was meant to feel quiet. If it wasn't deliberate in every pixel, it was a mistake. Then he told Declan to step out with him. They walked into the hallway and disappeared behind the frosted glass door of the side office. No one could hear what was said. 10 minutes passed. 15. Then Sebastian returned alone. Declan did not. No one asked where he went. Sebastian resumed the meeting. He called in the visual team. He called in brand operations. A new thank you message was to be created, effective immediately. This time it would be visual. A high-resolution bouquet photograph with neutral lighting and layered serif typography. Nothing lowercase. Nothing conversational. Julian quietly updated the post schedule, removing the upcoming content for the rest of the week to make space for the reset. Then he received a Slack ping from Arlo Vance, the brand's external image consultant, asking for access to the old content archive. He granted it without reply. By 4 p.m., a new post was live, a tasteful tulip arrangement photographed in soft golden hour lighting, with text that simply read, "Thank you, truly." No caption. Just a full stop. The comments were quiet. The metrics were steady. And the original post? Gone. As if it had never existed. The weeks that followed carried the uneasy quiet of a room that had just been vacuumed of all personality. The office still smelled of eucalyptus diffusers and hand lotion. The playlist still rotated between soft jazz and indie acoustic, but something beneath the air had shifted. Julian could feel it before he even swiped his badge each morning. The lightness was gone. Declan's desk sat empty for 2 days before it was cleared. No announcement was made. No all-team email. No farewell coffee run. Someone from HR came in early one morning and quietly packed up his things into a black cardboard box. By noon, his chair had been reassigned. The man who replaced him arrived the following Monday. Arlo Vance walked in like someone who had already been there a dozen times. Tall, sharp-boned, wearing muted tones that matched the interior of the office, he didn't introduce himself so much as blend in. Within the first hour, he had adjusted the brand's internal tone guide, flagged several campaign drafts for lack of alignment, and requested a private meeting with the head of creative to refresh core messaging. Julian watched him. From a distance, Arlo didn't speak unless asked. He made quiet notes with a fountain pen and often disappeared into the soundproof studio room with his headphones on. When he emerged, he always returned with a cleaner version of whatever someone else had already written. One Wednesday afternoon, Julian stayed late after everyone else had gone home. He wasn't waiting for anything in particular, just letting the silence stretch a little longer. On impulse, he decided to revisit the shared brand drive. He wanted to see the original drafts from the day of the blunder. Maybe to understand, maybe just to feel something familiar again. He navigated through the old campaign folders, digging deeper until he found a zip file labeled Tone Calibration, Legacy, Do Not Use. It was buried beneath 3 layers of archived strategy decks and inactive draft logs. Inside, he found 7 versions of the thank you post. Some were formal. Some were poetic. One was playful. One simply said, "We're grateful, always." But none of them had been used, except the minimalist version Declan had chosen. Julian sat back in his chair, staring at the screen. He remembered Declan's reasoning. How he had believed the brand needed to speak softer, not louder. How he wanted to give followers something that didn't sound corporate. How, for once, he wanted to make it feel like a whisper instead of a pitch. That whisper had cost him everything. Julian shut the folder but didn't delete it. Instead, he moved it into a personal directory he had quietly maintained, one with no label and no sharing permissions. The next morning, Arlo announced that moving forward, all posts would go through a throughful funnel. The word authentic was quietly retired from brand language and replaced with intentional. Julian nodded with the others, typing the changes into the internal database, but he couldn't shake the image of that draft folder sitting like a ghost behind the brand's polished exterior. In the next internal training, Arlo showed the team a new aesthetic guide titled Quiet Power. It included pre-approved sentence structures, ideal font weights, and a curated vocabulary list that banned words like just, maybe, and thanks. Julian downloaded the guide and saved it to the shared drive. Then he logged off. For the day, walking out of the building with the weight of something he couldn't name. Somewhere along the line, the brand had stopped being about people. Had become about erasing evidence. The 1-year anniversary of As Ever arrived without fanfare. No internal celebration, no cake in the kitchen, not even a scheduled post marking the milestone. Instead, Meghan appeared in a live stream from a minimalist sunroom draped in sheer curtains, sitting across from a soft-spoken florist who spoke about the healing energy of lavender stems. Her voice was smooth, carefully paced, and entirely devoid of spontaneity. Everything had been lit perfectly. Every word felt pre-cleared. The comments flowed in a steady stream of hearts, affirmations, and emojis. No one mentioned the thank you note. No one needed to. Back at the studio, Julian sat in the back of the monitoring room, eyes flickering between the live engagement chart and the team Slack thread that buzzed quietly with reactions. Arlo stood nearby, arms crossed, watching the live stream like it was an investment portfolio returning to green. He didn't take notes anymore. He didn't need to. Everything was already templated. At lunch, the team gathered at the long wood and stone table in the center of the office. A junior designer named Milo, fresh from a different startup culture, asked why the brand's color palette had shifted away from pastels toward cooler grays and soft taupes. The question was harmless, asked with genuine curiosity. Arlo leaned forward, wiping the corner of his mouth with a napkin. Then he smiled faintly and told them that every misstep is simply a new mood board. The others laughed, but Julian didn't. He kept eating, slowly, thinking about the old visuals that now existed only in screenshots and outdated folders. He thought about Declan, how no one had spoken his name in months. How his exit had been so quiet, so complete, it almost felt designed. That evening, Julian returned to his desk and opened the hidden folder he had kept from the archive sweep. He scrolled through the draft versions again, reading each one like it was a note from another timeline. One draft, the 5th version, ended with a line that stuck with him. "We're listening, and we're grateful you're here." It had never gone live. Now, as ever, didn't listen. It posted. It performed. It controlled. The brand's new voice was elegant and cold, like a showroom you couldn't sit in. And the audience, trained now by algorithms and curated feeds, had adjusted too. They liked the silence. It required less from them. Julian closed the folder and looked around the room. No one noticed. No one asked why he stayed late. They all left promptly at 6, heads down, earbuds in, carrying the brand's aesthetic like a uniform. He opened a blank document and typed a line from the draft again, just to see it in a fresh font. Then he deleted it and shut the screen. The next day, Arlo introduced a new AI tool to write copy for upcoming posts. It promised 90% efficiency and less human error. The team applauded. Julian nodded along, but in that moment, he knew something irreversible had happened. What began as a thank you note had become a warning, not just to the team, not just to Declan, but to anyone who still believed that a brand could speak with a human voice and survive the cost of honesty. Now, silence was the strategy. Clean, polished, safe. And every post since had spoken louder by saying less.